Welcome to the Scott and Holman podcast, two-man edition, post-Christmas edition. No Sam this time around. We're certainly sending our best thoughts his way. If you've been following us on Twitter, all you know, he's in the middle of it right now. So we look forward to having him back with us soon, hopefully with a little bit less of a hectic life going on around him in the near future. But in the meantime, we want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and certainly wish you all a Happy New Year as well, as this will be our most likely our last episode of 2023, barring some I don't know, major unforeseen event coming up that requires an immediate emergency podcast, which
honestly, fingers crossed we don't have to do it.
I kind of hope. I can't imagine what that thing would be. So it wouldn't be looking forward to that. But Bobby, my friend, what was the most fun thing you did over Christmas, and what is one thing that you hope to accomplish in 2024?
Oh, good questions. Good question. I didn't think we were going this deep in this episode. You know, I kind of got the run sheet. This wasn't included in it, but favorite thing I did for Christmas. So we switched it up this year. My parents actually came up for us, and wife being a pastor, the 11 o'clock service that we go to, the Catholics like to call it midnight mass, but we just do an 11 o'clock service, and it's a culmination of a really long day, especially when the holiday falls on a Sunday, like Christmas Eve or Christmas falls on Sunday. It tends to be a long day for my wife. And so, and her coworkers. And so at the midway through the service, you can just see the 14 hours just kind of wearing on everybody. And the sermon goes a little off the rails, but it's fun because, it's pretty much the church family there. So, so that was a ton of fun. And then in 2024, what do I hope to accomplish? After the really bad 2023 I had for my golf game, we really need to see that handicap start to trend back down a little bit. We had about 8 weeks where all I could do was shank the ball. I would hit 100 golf balls, and I think I'd make solid contact with maybe 2. And so we need to fix that in 2024. Play a little bit better golf this year. I played enough this year, but next year we need to play better golf. What about you?
So definitely the most fun thing I did over Christmas was I went up to just gorgeous Wimberley, Texas with my lovely partner, spent some time with her family. And on Christmas Eve, I spent about 5 hours from like 10:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon in the backyard with her dad and her brother building a swing set / sandbox / like slide for her little about to be 2-year-old nephew.
Oh, awesome.
For his Christmas present. And then like literally as we weren't even done putting it together when like they came over, and I was thinking, like, I'm worried because like we're having fun, we're having a good time, we're having a good nice bonding moment, but you sure hope that the kid doesn't come out, play with it for like 5 seconds and be like, all right, I'm bored, because then you're like, what was the time commitment for? What was it? So
the ROI is not great on that.
I'm saying. So but the little kiddo came out, and like we weren't even quite done yet, and he is just like, they could not hardly drag him off of that thing.
That's awesome.
Like the rest of the time he was there. So that was a lot of fun. And in terms of what I want to accomplish in 2024, I have a U of H themed goal. I may have mentioned it to you before, but
should I have done that? Should I have done a U of H themed?
I'm glad that
my
you
bad,
did.
guys.
That way we could have it be have some contrast here. But no, so my goal is to see the University of Houston men's basketball program play Kansas in 3 different places.
We have talked about that.
Going to Lawrence for the road trip in February. Going to certainly see them at the Fertitta Center to close out the regular season, and then hope to be in Mexico City in December to see them play their non-conference game down there. So that is my Cougar related goal. My other Cougar related goal is to get even more of you going to charliehustle.com and using promo code SHP15 to get some beautiful Cougar merchandise. It looks so good. It's so incredibly comfortable. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to love it. If you didn't get enough Cougar gear for Christmas, make up for that right now by going to charliehustle.com using promo code SHP15 at checkout to get your 15% discount. We would also love you to support us by supporting our friends at the 1012 Network. Make sure to follow the 1012 Network podcast. Very, something that I know pretty much all 3 of us listen to on a regular basis for what's going on in the Big 12. So can't recommend them enough. Give them a follow on the social media. They're good folks, and you're going to learn a lot more about Houston's conference for doing so. Bobby, we've got a fair amount to talk to, so we're actually going to be a little bit different. Usually we kind of start with the in-season sports, but I think some of the changes, the massive changes that have gone on with the football program in the last 2 weeks in terms of both the coaching staff and the makeup of the roster heading into next year are significant enough that it merits leading with football up front. So definitely a lot of coaching staff news in the 2 weeks since we had our last podcast, as we took the week off. And I think kind of the two big news items that we haven't really gotten to talk to yet was the two hirings that were until they weren't. We talked in our last episode about Slade Nagel, the offensive coordinator, who was supposed to be following Willie Fritz to Houston until he wasn't. He was staying at either staying at Tulane or looking at other opportunities going forward. We found out since then that he's replaced by Kevin Barbay. And then at defensive line coach, our last episode, we talked about Gerald Chapman, who had been widely expected to be hired or was being reported to be about to be, again, following Fritz from Tulane until he wasn't. And he was staying at Tulane, which opened the door for Houston to bring back the wildly popular Brian Early as their defensive line coach. So, Bobby, get into these, what did you kind of think of seeing those two, kind of reports that were out there and then them both, kind of being retracted or going the other way? And what do you think about where Houston landed on both of these two hires?
So I think, we kind of talked about this amongst ourselves, me, you, and Sam, about what did it feel like having these coaches sign with us and then, kind of bail.
I don't know other than sign with us. But
Yeah. Right. Sorry. You're right. Being reported that they were coming to the University of Houston. And then when they said they weren't, it was reported that they were just going to stay at Tulane. And to me, that kind of rang some alarm bells to me, just kind of like, hey, why are they staying at Tulane? Like we gave Fritz a really nice package for his assistants. We gave him a nice assistant pool dollar-wise on his assistants. And then we were getting beat by Tulane for these guys. And it kind of came out at the end that I can't remember if it was the D-line coach or the OC that was reported here, then left, that ended up going to Florida. I can't remember which one it was.
I believe it was Chapman, the defensive line.
Yeah. And so it wasn't a big surprise to see him turn us down and go to Florida. That kind of makes sense. But we had some discussions about how much can you trust reporting that you just see on Twitter until the university comes out with something. It's not official, right? Until I see it on the dotted line and I see a tweet with a crudely photoshopped University of Houston shirt and hat on a coach, I didn't want to believe that they were going to be our offensive coordinator or our D-line coach. So I was a little concerned when the kind of shuffling was happening, especially when it felt like we were being beat out by Tulane for these guys' services. And with Tulane still having a bowl game, I think that was also a key role for a lot of these guys in staying or leaving and things like that. So I kind of understood it, but it was definitely concerning when I first saw it. And then in terms of where we actually landed, I love keeping Brian Early. If we've produced some really good defensive lines under him, and if nothing else, his guys seem to love him. His guys seem to love to play for him. They are loyal to him. He's doing something, and having a guy like that in your locker room is never a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt weird seeing it happen. Like if one of them happens, it's easy to write it off as like, hey, who knows? Like
bad reporting. Literally,
yeah, either bad reporting or just like literally anything can happen behind the scenes to just like make a guy change his mind. Like there's, it's just hard to know exactly what that is. If you see it happen twice, you think, is it really? Because again, you don't know what's going on with these situations exactly, but is it really the fact that Tulane was able to kind of outbid us, so to speak, to keep these guys? And I mean, and to be fair, like Tulane is reportedly was ready to match the offer that we made to Willie Fritz. I think they're probably, I would imagine, trying to continually increase their assistant pool like everybody is. They spent some money to hire John Summerall, who I think, away from Troy, away from another G5, which I think was an amazing hire. He was a guy that, like, had Fritz not been out there, I've been happy with Houston hiring John Summerall. Like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
That is a quality hire. So good on them. And again, you never know, but I think Chapman leaving for Florida kind of tells you that was less about wanting to stay at Tulane and more about like, his agent going, hey, I feel like we've got a higher money offer coming in from an SEC program here.
Yeah.
Maybe pump the brakes. Nagel, you never know. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone's happy. It's just, obviously, if you're a Houston fan watching this podcast, we probably don't need to tell you that it's good news, and we're happy that that Brian Early is coming back. He's wildly popular with his players. He's done a fantastic job here. I probably was a factor in the fact that talented freshman defensive tackle Justin Benton exited the transfer portal and ended up coming back to Houston after that news broke. So I think we're happy there. Barbe at an offensive coordinator, I think it's certainly less of a slam dunk positive hire than Early is. He's 40. I think he's actually, his 41st birthday will be is tomorrow, the 28th. So I don't know if that counts as him being a youngish coach anymore. That used to be if you were 40, 41, you were a youngish coordinator.
Yeah.
The way things are going, I don't know if that counts anymore. But played quarterback at Grambling, and I was amazed. Even by football coaching standards, his resume is all over the place. He's had 12 stops in 21 years of coaching. This will be the fourth different team he's been the offensive coordinator for in a 4-year span. Along the way, he's been everything from a high school coach to a director of player development, position coach for receivers and quarterbacks. He's been a special teams coordinator, done a little bit of everything. And, I think if you want to like this hire, the best thing you can do, and probably the fairest thing to do regardless, is to write off his 2023 season entirely. He was at Mississippi State, where they did not have a very strong
they did
season. But they had just kind of everything in the kitchen sink thrown at them in terms of injuries and things like that. I think they were down to their third string quarterback for a decent amount of the season. So, I think it's maybe one of those situations where,
and like their coach died. In December.
Also, their coach died in December. That was a thing too. So probably one of those situations where no one was ever going to do well in that situation. Just kind of a tough situation to be in all around. You look at the past couple of years before that. 2022 had a top 50 offense at App State per SP Plus, had a top 70 offense at Central Michigan the year before that. Those aren't overwhelming rankings, but I don't think they're bad rankings given the school that he's putting them up at. At both stops. He, coordinated an offense that was easily ranked higher than that team's defense was, which is maybe a decent indicator that he was, I think, doing something decent with the talent on hand to him. So, I think, like I said, as hires go, like it's like fine. I thought it was kind of funny when we didn't get Slade Nagel. You said you didn't feel great about it because you didn't think we'd be able to do a whole lot better. I said I felt totally fine about it because I couldn't imagine that we were going to end up doing much worse. I think we were both right?
Yeah.
We hired someone who I feel kind of the same as I felt about Slade Nagel. I'm like, sure, I don't love it. I don't hate it. Given the composition of the rest of the coaching staff, I still feel really good overall about this coaching staff, but it's just kind of like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I think, like you said, so my uncle is a big Mississippi State fan. And so he wanted their head coach gone. And I was like, Game 7. And I was like, it's Game 7. And I didn't think they'd get rid of him. I'm like, why would you get rid of a coach like 9 games into a season? And like, they fired their head coach. And like I said, their coach died. I don't know how you could expect a ton out of that Mississippi State team going into the season. Like, I don't see how you could expect this top 20 deep offense and all this stuff. Like, the guy who ran their offense no longer is with them, literally. So like, I try not to count this year for the OC, but he did put up some good offenses in other locations, like you said. So I think it's a fine hire. I'm not, kind of like you said, I'm not disappointed. It's not like we hired somebody and I'm just like totally baffled by why you would even consider him. But I think, again, I don't know how you would get who you would get that's better, right? I always talk about whenever people want to replace their coach or talk about something like that, I'm always like, okay, but who would you bring in that's better? I have this conversation with people who watch the NFL a lot and they're like, I want to get rid of my quarterback. I'm like, okay, you want to get rid of Dak Prescott. I understand he's not the best quarterback in the world, like in your opinion, but like you have to replace Dak Prescott, right? Like you have to bring somebody better in, and it's not easy to find somebody better than that. And so I don't know how you would do much better than this hire without getting somebody who a bigger, higher money program would want.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly, You have to imagine if you go down to a lower level, you might find someone that's put up some numbers that's more of a roll of the dice. Whereas I think maybe this is more of
this is a higher floor, lower ceiling,
right?
Compared to the lower floor ceiling that's out of this world.
Right. Yeah. But no, I think if you had, some, because there are like, FCS programs that'll come up in Texas that are just, putting up a bunch of numbers. And, I think if that's the an option, maybe you find kind of that local coordinator who you can kind of entice with the Big 12 gig. But yeah, I mean, I think, again, not to say I'd never think that U of H will ever be able to hire an offensive coordinator that has a little bit more wow factor than Kevin Barbay is. But like I said, it's just not every hire is the like, ooh,
not every hire is Willie Fritz.
Exactly. Not every Fritz or even like Shia Wood, the defensive coordinator, who I think we were all like, oh yeah, nice. Not every hire gets to be that. There's a lot of good aspects to University of Houston right now. There's a lot of some aspects that aren't there yet that other programs are better than you. So you get to you take the positives or the negatives, and I think this is kind of a hire that represents that maybe.
And Fritz has shown that he can do really good job hiring coordinators. And then when people take a coordinator from him, he replaces them with a coordinator who seems to do pretty well. So it doesn't concern me as much as it may concern some others.
Yeah. We've had, I believe, 4 other coaches that have been hired since our last episode. We're going to run through those real quick. Quarterbacks coach Sean Bell from beautiful China Spring, Texas, played at Baylor from 2003 to 06. Has been back at Baylor since 2017, going from offensive analyst to O-line coach to tight ends coach to quarterbacks coach. Matt Rule and Dave Aranda, not too terrible coaches to have served and learned under, I think. Bobby, I know you've got some Sean Bell anecdata for us as a fellow.
So so as a China Spring Cougar, it's more stories about his dad. So so one of my first. So I moved to China Spring. China Spring at the time is a 3A school outside of Waco. It's like 20 minutes outside of Waco. We moved my junior year. I'm a new kid in a really small school, right? And it's just like Friday Night Lights when you think of like high school football. I don't have to tell many people in Texas about this, but small town high school football. And I moved there and I decided to join the newspaper. And our sponsor goes, all right, you got to do a district preview. And I was like, okay, I don't really know about the district. She goes, schedule a meeting with Coach Bell. Coach Bell is a god in the city. He's the athletic director. He's the head football coach. He is somebody like you don't talk to. And like, he is that guy in the city. And so I scheduled my little thing during newspaper hour or whatever. And I walk into his office and his office is just painted half. It's China Spring, Columbia blue. And the other half is green and gold. And I have to walk past like 3 doors to get into his office. And I walk in and the walls half painted Baylor, half painted Columbia blue. And it's just newspaper articles of Sean just surrounding me. And there's trophies and everything. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, hi, Mr. Bell. How's everything going? Can you tell me about the Lorena Leopards? And so like his dad, though, was the nicest guy in the world. Gave me the full hour. I got to write the article. I ended up winning like awards for it at like All Southern. So like it was a huge deal to me and I will forever be in debt to his dad. And then 2 weeks before I graduated high school. So when we moved there, some of my PE credits didn't transfer because of study hall and all that stuff when I played baseball in high school. And so it's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before graduation and we're outside on the track and I'm in PE, right? I'm a senior in PE. No senior takes PE. Like, and I was kind of athletic. Like, I'm not saying I'm athletic, but like I'm more than the PE kids were, right? And so we're out there and we're throwing the football around and Coach Bell decides to come out. And this one guy throws the football and it's out of my reach. And I just like stick a hand out, one hand, bring it in, like tip, like twinkle toes on the sideline. Like what a catch, right? And Coach Bell runs over to me and he goes, son, why aren't you playing football for me? I go, Coach, I graduated in 2 weeks. And he goes, why didn't you play football for me? I go, I'm 5'5" and I run a 5-second 40. Like I'm slow and I'm tiny. Like I weigh 120 pounds. And he's like, I could have used you somewhere. You could have played tight end. And I was like, you had Bobby Martin to play tight end. Bobby Martin, like was like 6 foot, was like a dude, right? It's just like, I was like, and he was like, I still could have used you. And like, he stormed off. And I was like, cool, I guess. All right. So like the bells are like a big deal where I'm from. So like, in his, and, the other one we hired, not Sean, Brian, he was quarterback when I was in high school. So like, he was younger than me, but that dude, he was a good player then too. So it was kind of cool because I hadn't seen it when it first happened. Sam texted me and he's like, what do you think of us hiring some China Spring Cougars? I was like, okay, hold on. They may be roughly my age because I'm starting to get there in age. And he sends me the link and I was like, oh, snap the bells. Let's go. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So those are my little anecdotes about their dad, who is who just a good dude overall. It's just good family. Very excited to see him.
Fantastic. Love it. I knew you were going to have, and we didn't talk about what that was going to be. You just kind of mentioned that you were going to talk about China Spring, and that did not disappoint for sure. Looking at the other recent additions to the coaching staff, running backs coach Jordy Joseph was named to that position. Joseph was formerly an assistant under Fritz at Tulane, moved to Southern Miss for the 2021 season, spends the next 2 years as the running backs coach, coaching Frank Gore Jr., who went from being kind of a nice player when Joseph got there to being just an absolute badass under his tutelage. He moved actually to quarterbacks coach for this past season for Southern Miss, but will be coaching running backs for the Cougs this coming year. And, kind of as Sam tweeted, Bobby, this one comfortably passes the are they sad to see him go at his old employer test.
Absolutely. It's a slam dunk hire. And, we had mentioned how it looked a little concerning that he was that Coach Fritz was kind of hiring his friends and just giving them some pay raises, but getting him to go out for a couple of years and learn something new. And then, just like you said, turn Frank Gore Jr. into just an absolute beast, which also having Frank Gore Jr. As a college player just makes me feel terrible. It like makes my bones hurt just thinking about it. Like my joints hurt when I say Frank Gore Jr. My knee is like, ugh.
Yeah.
But Frank Gore Jr. was an absolute beast. And if we're getting even half of that, I'll be excited.
Man, on an athlete junior tangent, like Fernando Tatis Jr. is the one.
Oh, dude, it's so bad.
No way.
No
way.
And he can't be this good.
I know. That one hurts. Getting back to the Cougar coaching staff, inside linebackers coach was named James Ross III, a real young guy, feels like a fast riser. Actually, his last college season was 2015, so someone who's playing very recently. Got his start in coaching at a D3 school, coaching linebackers, got promoted to defensive coordinator. Luke Fickell, in his final season in Cincinnati, plucked Ross from the D3 ranks, made him his linebackers coach. And then when Fickell left for Wisconsin this past year, went to Tulane, now follows Fritz from Tulane to Houston. Man, and again, like, you want to talk about like good items on your resume. Like if Luke Fickell sees you in your early 20s, mid 20s, and is like, yeah, this guy's ready to be like a position coach. Like that guy knows defense, that guy knows ball. That's a strong endorsement for me for sure.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If Fickell says he's good, I think he's pretty good. Like, let's just be honest. Like, I think I said it about some, our kicker this year, who transferred from Alabama, I think preseason. I was like, if he was good enough to play for Saban at least a year, he's good enough for me.
There you go. And then finally, the strength and conditioning coach was named for Houston, Kurt Hester, who also follows Willie Fritz from Tulane. Kind of been rumored finally. I believe it was actually made official. Someone who people just rave about. He was Football Scoop's 2022 strength and conditioning coach of the year. Just, widely beloved, everywhere he's gone. Very much in the same vein as Jordy Joseph, passes is his former school sad to see him go test with flying colors. He is someone that it just seems like everyone that has had him work with him just kind of raves about.
Yeah, that definitely seems like something that we've kind of been struggling with the past couple of years is the strength and conditioning of the team at some point, and we talked about this preseason football is the depth that you're going to need and how much tougher the games are. Bodies are bigger. People are faster in the Big 12. So you got to make sure the players can stand that wear and tear. It's different than playing in the American, right? The American focuses a lot of times on speed and getting out there. And in the Big 12, you're just hitting bigger bodies. And so you want to make sure you also have bigger, stronger bodies. So So anytime you can get an S&C guy who is a top flight guy like what we just got is a massive plus. We haven't had one that I've been like super massive fan of since what's his name? Larry Jackson.
Yeah.
Larry Jackson. When we were running the high tempo offenses and it just seemed we were just in better shape than anybody else. And coming from Tulane, you know, it's hot, muggy, just like Houston. It's a special kind of thing that you gotta kind of train for. So excited to see him join the staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look for an analog, I mean, I think have all seen what an incredible piece of the men's basketball program that Alan Bishop has been. And if you get a guy that kind of has that same kind of respect and that same kind of CV coming in, I think that could be huge for the program as well. The Cougars have also, in addition to the coaching staff, reshaped the roster a lot in the last couple of weeks. We did see National Signing Day come and go, which saw Houston adding players via the transfer portal and the high school and JUCO ranks and getting those guys officially signed and into the program. And, you know, I think we'll start with the transfers. And what really was remarkable, pardon me, and I did not realize until I was actually starting to put together my notes for this podcast, in the 15 days since we have last podcasted, the only Cougar player to enter the transfer portal has been wide receiver Jacoby Banks. And Justin Benton, who I think we talked about before with in regards to Brian Early, was Houston's top-rated defensive recruit in last year's class. Someone who had, only played, I think, 3 or 4 games this year, but obviously was very much a, to save his redshirt type of situation, and someone that was expected to do a lot of big things in the future. He had entered the transfer portal and came back out of the transfer portal after U of H retained Brian Early. So again, no offense to the young Mr. Banks who left, but like that's a transfer net gain over the last 2 weeks, before you even talk about the fact that Houston also added 9 guys from other schools over the last 2 weeks. So really, again, you saw, I think a couple of players, I would say probably 4 in particular, kind of early on in the transfer portal were out the door. And I think it's inevitable you're going to lose some of those guys. And I think the fact that you see those 4 guys leaving within the first week or so kind of tells you that, like, okay, you probably never really were real likely to hold on to those guys. Some guys just kind of have their minds made up and there's nothing you can do. But the fact that, again, to see only 1 transfer to a player that didn't play a big role last year and getting Benton to come back out of the portal over the last 2 weeks has been, really, really impressive in terms of a player retention standpoint.
Yeah. Whenever you get a new coach, that's kind of the concern, is that you're going to lose a bunch of players. And then can you keep together your recruiting class? And Coach Fritz has done that. We haven't, despite the new coaching staff, we haven't had a bunch of guys go into the portal that weren't already going to go. And I think with the recruiting class that we ended up with, it's hard to be upset about this.
Yeah, so looking at the guys coming in, Bobby, who have you really liked over the last couple of weeks in terms of the incoming transfers?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to transfers, Coach Fritz, and most people, I'm not going to say anything new here, but you win football games on the offensive and the defensive line. So Dakota White transferring in is going to be one of our offensive linemen, 85 ranked, an 85 overall, 3-star recruit coming from Louisiana Tech. He got a bunch of recognition in Conference USA the last couple of years for his performance on the offensive line. He's Coach Fritz has said he's going to play the 6 best linemen, and I think Dakota White's going to be one of those six linemen that's going to come in and just make a difference. And we've talked about this guy in the past when he transferred in. Corey Platt Jr., the staff at Tulane was super excited about him, and to get that officially, that letter of intent signed, sealed, delivered, super exciting. The staff loved him, was super excited about him coming into the year. And I think he is kind of showing why. Hopefully we can see why the team was as excited about him as they were. And then finally, Kentrell Webb, any help in the secondary that we can get. I think the 3 of us, I don't want to speak for Sam, would agree that our secondary could probably use a little bit of help going into the season. So Kentrell Webb going to come in, hopefully make a big difference as well. How about you?
Yeah, I think that someone's got, you mentioned Dakota White on the offensive line, 30 career starts at Louisiana Tech. The Cougs also added Jake Wiley on the offensive line. Most recently played for UCLA. Made an appearance in every game as a reserve for them this past season. Made 20 starts with Colorado before that. So adding 50 career starts on the offensive line. I don't know that either of these guys is going to come in and be an all Big 12 type performer, but you need some bodies, you need some experienced bodies on the line, and Wiley and White certainly provide that. And then on the defensive line too, another area where Houston needs to add some more depth. You get Keith Cooper Jr. from Tulane, has been a big contributor each of the last 3 years, brings 10.5 career sacks to a defensive end group that, as of right now, outside of Keith Cooper Jr., Houston's defensive ends have 1 career FBS sack to their credit. So getting a guy with 10.5 has kind of got some, experience creating havoc from the end position. I think that's big. You add Everett Rogers at the defensive tackle position as well. That's been as a couple of weeks ago, that was a really, really thin position for Houston. Only, I think, like 3 or 4 guys, scholarship guys. So Everett Rogers, someone who was, I think, good, not great at the AAC level for Tulsa. Again, it's someone who, it's his final year of eligibility. So you certainly hope his final year is his best year. But even if he kind of only looks like 2022, Everett Rogers, again, it's not an all-conference caliber player, but it's a player that you need. It's a capable player heading into to 2024. I wanted to talk about the linebackers as well. You mentioned Corey Platt Jr., someone I think we're all really excited about, but Houston added 2 more guys at that position in the last couple of weeks. Michael Batten, from actually, funny enough, guys from both of the Louisiana-city schools. Michael Batten from Louisiana Monroe, Kendra Gant from Louisiana Lafayette. Batten, a really interesting story, was actually played in for Seven Lakes High School. Shout out Seven Lakes High School in Katy. Was quarterback there. Had to go all the way to New York State to play at Nassau Community College as a quarterback at the JUCO level. Did well, but just still was continuing to not really get recruited. Kind of had a connection that he got a walk-on offer for Louisiana Monroe to play linebacker. Played a year as a walk-on linebacker. Did so well, got a scholarship, was their leading tackler this past season. And now comes to Houston with his last year of eligibility. And then Gant was also a JUCO guy. Originally spent the last 2 years at Louisiana Lafayette, where he accumulated 14.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. Bobby, here's a quick random pop quiz for you. How many current players who are currently set to be on Houston's roster in 2024, so either incoming players or returning players, that are expected to be on the roster, graded out higher in PFF's player ratings last year than Kendra Gant?
6.
It's 0. It's literally 0. If you believe PFF, which again, we don't think that they are, the infallible, but I think there's at least some correlation there. So I think that's encouraging to get Gant in there, as well as, like I said, a guy like Batten, who's been a real leader, big tackle machine. So I think between adding those guys, adding Platt, like you mentioned, Traylon Payne has been pretty good as a youngster the last couple of years, and he's back. You've got Jamal Morris came back. It was a ton of experience. I'm suddenly looking up and actually kind of feeling pretty good about where Houston's linebacker group is at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, Gant coming in is going to, he's borderline 4-star transfer guy. So super excited about that one as well.
Yeah, and then you mentioned the secondary, Kentrell Webb, the safety coming over from Tulane, was a class of 2022 guy from Pato and Katy. Played just 3 games, took a red shirt, saw some good bit of action as a reserve this past season. So hasn't shown a ton yet, but he's got 3 years of eligibility left, and you always want to get even players that end up being good players in the secondary quite often aren't ready to go their first couple of years. So I think, someone that you could see continue to develop. And then Houston also adding a couple of cornerbacks in the last couple of weeks as well. Chris Davis from Southern University and Jeremiah Wilson from Syracuse. Davis following the footsteps of Isaiah Hamilton, a cornerback transferring from the SWAC to Houston. It worked out pretty well for Hamilton last year.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, Davis is another guy who again graded out really well with PFF, so that's an intriguing add to me. Wilson too, someone who is kind of played a fair amount as an underclassman at the position where you don't really necessarily want to do that, and he's actually looked pretty good doing it at Syracuse. So you get him with 2 years of eligibility left. I'm happy about that as well. And then again, the multi-million-dollar question is whether or not Isaiah Hamilton is actually in the portal, because like one guy who is kind of like a recruiting portal guy tweeted that he was expecting Hamilton was expected to enter the portal, but No one else has mentioned it that I've seen as well. Hamilton's Twitter page as of this afternoon says he's a Cougar. So let's hope that that's true. But kind of same, as much as we've been not feeling great about the defense, the linebacker group I'm feeling pretty decent about. You look at cornerback, you get, Davis and Wilson coming into a group that has hopefully Hamilton back. And someone that I'd kind of forgotten about, potentially Latrell McCutcheon, who was just an elite high school recruit, saw a bunch of the field early on with first Oklahoma as a true freshman and then USC the next year, and then had to sit out this past year as a two-time transfer. I'd kind of forgotten about him, but he's still on the roster. He's someone that you'd think could make a difference potentially as well. Suddenly, I'm kind of intrigued by this cornerback group as well.
Yeah, I think everything is just kind of fallen into place here. There's still going to be big question marks, and I think when we start our season preview here in 8 months, we're definitely going to be bringing up a lot of parts on this team that we're not going to be 100% sure on. But looking at it, winning recruiting day or national signing day is better than losing it, which, let's be honest, we thought we were going to lose it, and now we feel okay about it.
Yeah, no, I think certainly there's some positions you'd certainly still like to see some more help come in. I think both sides of the line, that's still the case. I think your safety group, that's certainly still the case. But yeah, you for a roster that a couple weeks ago felt like it was, it felt a couple weeks ago like it was much further away from being kind of a complete and competent Big 12 roster than it feels now in the present.
Absolutely.
In addition to the transfers, the staff definitely did a lot of work over the last couple of weeks in terms of recruiting first-time Division I players. The staff actually got, in the last 2 weeks, 7 new high school recruits and 3 JUCO recruits who all committed.
Huh.
Who were all newly committed and signed to the program since we last spoke to you.
That's interesting.
Yeah. In addition, they signed, I believe it's all but either 1 or 2 guys who had committed under the previous staff, including a couple of highest rated guys there. So Houston's high school recruiting ranking rose from the triple digits where it was when the staff got here to now 68 as of today. So it's almost too easy to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway, Bobby. I guess the ship hadn't sailed on 2024 recruiting.
It feels like when you have a guy, when you're playing NCAA football and you have a guy who's like has you third on his list the whole time, and then you finally offer him and you jump up to first and you're just like, oh, and then he instant commits and you're like, oh, sweet. Like, it just feels like there were some guys that we hadn't really talked to that were very interested in coming here, and now they were just like, oh, you actually want me to play for you? And we're like, yes, dear God, yes, we want you to play for us. So yeah, definitely doesn't seem like it has set sail.
Yeah, so a number of interesting recruits coming in. Wide receiver Kobe Young, one of the really exciting ones, high 3-star guy, bunch of P5 offers, decommitted from Georgia Tech a couple of days before signing with Houston on signing day. Just had a lot of really high level offers. Treville Frederick Jr., tight end, a high 3-star from Louisiana, had committed to the Tulane staff over a bunch of P5 interest, flipped late to Houston. You got DJ Butler, running back, formerly a Coastal Carolina commit. Jayshon Ridgel, flipped from South Alabama at the last second, a pretty decent wide receiver commit. Offensive lineman Derek Joyner, solid 3-star offensive lineman, another guy who had committed to the Tulane under the staff, then flipped to U of H. Defensive lineman Darius Washington chose U of H over offers from Tech and UTSA. The Cougs also added kicker Trey Fury. So those are the 7 new high school guys that kind of bumped up your recruiting profile. And then, like I said, a couple of guys there to like. It's still, all in all, doesn't make for a fantastic recruiting class because of the late start that they got with them. But you heard Coach Fritz say, like, hey, like this is the class for this year because it's what we could do. But like we're gonna recruit more high schoolers going forward, and definitely, even based on what they were able to get kind of the last second, makes you intrigued by the kind of class that they could bring in with a whole year to recruit.
Yeah, it was the National Signing Day video or press conference that he had was really interesting when he was like, looks like right now we have 20 and 10 are high school, 10 are transfer. We're going to slowly make our way back to changing those proportions. So pretty interesting stuff there from him. when he was mentioning that. You kind of went through our list of recruits, and I may have missed you saying this, but Raekwon Bell has me super excited. Offensive tackle and a list of offers. So I'm as a U of H fan, I don't always look at stars, right? Because we've done a lot with lower rated guys, but I tend to look at offers, right? If you're getting offers from a bunch of, and this was something that I noticed with a Major, right? Now, who I said his name. So if I say it 2 more times, he's going to pop up on the screen. Is that who we were competing with for recruits were not P5 schools, were not higher end G5 schools, right? You're competing against some lower schools. But you look at Raekwon Bell, he's got the U of H offer, Arizona State, Baylor, Cal, Colorado State, Marshall, Memphis. I mean, he's got an offer from TCU. I mean, those are the guys who you want to compete with right now. You're not in a spot where you're going to beat Alabama for a bunch of guys. You're not in a spot where you're going to beat Georgia for guys. But those are the level that you're playing at kind of guys that you are going to bring in. And again, more help on the O-line is beyond what we need. So super excited to see Raekwon Bell come in. And then you mentioned Travell Frederick. That offer list is insane as well, right? He's got the Alabama, Florida, Georgia Tech. I mean, Texas A&M offered him, North Texas, Mississippi State. These are guys who are at the level you want to be at and at your level, and you're beating them for those guys with a 2-week turnaround. And I think one thing that Coach Fritz did, you see, I mentioned this earlier with coaching changes, you oftentimes see a lot of recruits kind of drop out and follow the other guy, or just open up their recruiting again. And man, we didn't see a lot of people decommit from University of Houston. So super exciting that, the second day he was on the job, first day he was on the job, you saw him at high schools. You saw him at Houston area high schools, taking pictures with guys who have already committed to us. And he was out day one hustling. And it's just something you never saw with the previous staff. I'm not saying that it was the worst thing ever with the previous staff, and I'm not here to just sit here and bash the previous staff, but you never saw those kind of pictures with him at the high schools, shaking hands with recruits, doing that kind of stuff. And you saw it day one of him being our head coach.
Yeah, you mentioned keeping most of the guys that were recruited under Holgorsen. There weren't a whole lot of them, but the highly rated ones like Raekwon Bell, they were able to hold on to. Ronell McClain, another offensive lineman, in addition to flipping Joyner from Tulane, like I mentioned. So it's not a real big high school class, but you've got 3 offensive linemen who I think are pretty intriguing, and it's just one of those positions where you're not gonna get, because there's so much competition for offensive linemen in the portal. You're just not going to go out there and get 3 or 4 like above average Big 12 offensive linemen in the portal, right? Because just again, like if you're an above average Big 12 offensive lineman, you have 75 offers in the transfer portal. It's just hard to land a whole bunch of those guys. But getting some of those youngsters, those high schoolers now that you can turn into good offensive linemen on your own roster that you don't have to go into the portal to get. I think that's going to pay dividends down the line. Do want to mention a trio of JUCO guys this time with U of H as well, all committed in the days up to signing day. On the defensive line, Xavier Stillman, another guy, from Hutchinson Community College, one of the big powerhouse JUCOs in the country. Defensive tackle there, again, a position Houston needs. And then the offensive line, you brought in a couple of JUCO offensive linemen, Hingano Hautau and Larry Crawford. I haven't seen a ton of either of those guys, but at the very least, they kind of give you some depth on the line there. So good to get those additions for depth. And I will say, Bobby, I'm pretty sure that the saying Major Applewhite's name 3 times does not make him appear. That does not work, because if it did, he would be following Sam around all the time because of all the tweets. So I think we can rule that one out. Speaking of roster additions, we're going to keep moving with Cougar volleyball, who added a pair of outside hitters in the last couple of weeks with Angela Grieve from Miami and Avery Shemitis from Pepperdine. It's a big position of need outside hitter with Abby Jackson, Kenna Sauer, and Nana Mbanu all running out of eligibility at that position after this season. And with Grieve, I think is really the headliner there, really exactly what you want in terms of a plug and play, ready to be a high level Big 12 player right away. 2-time second team All ACC performer for the Hurricanes. Has been to the NCAA tournament with Miami each of the past 3 seasons, including a pair of NCAA tournament wins. Like I said, just 4-year contributor. Just a top 10 in basically the all time in the career attacking stats at Miami. A program that's played some pretty good volleyball. And then Shamitis, originally from Sugarland, played for a good Pepperdine team the last couple of years. Was more of a rotational piece. The staff, you have to imagine the staff in all likelihood recruited her out of high school from the Houston area a couple of years ago, and has an idea of what they think she's capable of. And I think that the reason for excitement there is that she was just a really, really highly decorated high school recruit. ABCA had her as a first team All-American as a high school senior, in addition to other kind of awards that she got. So obviously we'd love to see Coach Rare and his staff kind of unlock that potential as she's got a couple of years left. But between the two of them, definitely feeling a lot better about where Houston's at that outside hitter position heading into 2024.
Yeah, and it really just is a clear example of Coach Rare just not being overly dependent on the transfer market, but knowing that he can get some players in. And I trust Coach Rare fully to find ladies who are going to fit a system perfectly and continue the success that we have as a group.
Yeah, and certainly we've heard Coach Rare talk about kind of the uptick that he's seeing in recruiting, both with the move to the Big 12 and Houston kind of showing proof of concept in the NCAA tournament the last couple of years. So really excited to see what Houston is going to continue to add both via the portal and via the high school route. Finally, before we get to basketball, while we're talking off-season transfer moves, did want to mention Cougar Soccer adding a trio of transfers: Jocelyn Alonso, Chloe Adams, and Lainey Gonzalez via the portal. Alonso is one that stands out for me. Midfielder forward from Memphis, who you may remember from our AAC days, is a powerhouse program, made the AAC all-rookie team as a freshman, was second team all-AAC as a sophomore. Adams and Gonzalez, both defenders from Oklahoma and LSU, respectively. Gonzalez, 29 appearances for the Tigers, all but 2 from the bench over the last 2 years. Adams was just a freshman this past year, did not see action with the Sooners, so we'll still have all 4 years of eligibility left. So, trio of interesting transfers there, but I think definitely the headliner. Really intrigued to see what Alonso can do for the Cougs.
Yeah, the big question is, can they score?
Yeah.
Can the recruits we brought in score? That's really what that team needs. So
score against in the Big 12.
Score in the Big 12. Yeah, can you score in the Big 12? Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it, because we could score, just not in the Big 12. So.
Well, moving finally to the in-season sports, Cougar men's and women's basketball in season. We'll start with the men. And unfortunately, starting with the men, before we talk about the games that happen and the games that are to come, we do have to mention what happened in one of those games. That is that Terrance Arceneaux tore his Achilles tendon and is out for the year. That is just one of those injuries. Anytime I'd even just hear it described, I just cringe.
Yeah,
heavily.
I can't. I when it happened, I told my wife, I was like, I don't think there's an injury I want less than a torn Achilles.
It sounds truly terrible. Just obviously your heart just breaks for Terrance, who was just worked incredibly hard and was, I think, kind of one of the players we widely expected to really have improve over the course of the season and just end up having a really strong sophomore season. We kind of saw that in the games against the top teams. That he was kind of, part of the 8-man rotation that the staff wanted to run with the 5 starters and him and, Dunn and Tugler off the bench. So certainly, him going for the year, it's and really unfortunate for him. And it's just also, it's certainly going to be a hurdle for this team, which is going to have to kind of figure out, kind of rework your rotation without Arceneaux.
Yeah. Just one, you never want to see an injury for many of your guys. Really, from anybody, you don't want to see injuries, but a torn Achilles, a guy who's going to be out the whole year, your heart breaks for him, because it can't be easy playing in this system, right? Like, the reward for the practices and all that are the games, and you get to be out there and you get to perform at the Fertitta Center, and you get to perform. You go through those really tough Kelvin Sampson practices, and to have it taken out because of injury, just, let's be honest, it sucks, man. It just sucks. There's no other way to describe it except the fact that it sucks.
Yeah, and it sucks for the kid who's, obviously it had to be tremendously painful and now gets to go through the very arduous rehab. And like you said, it's already you're choosing to play for Kelvin Sampson, which is just choosing to be made to work really, really, really hard. And then to just get to, on top of that, get to do the several months of rehab of having what sounds like a horrible injury. Just terrible for him. And then just, for Houston, like I said, it's, he's one of kind of, he was kind of your best small ball four, when you kind of want to go to the 4-guard lineup. Yeah, I think it's a little bit harder to do that against good teams without him there. So all of a sudden your front court looks pretty thin. And I think you and me and Sam were kind of going back and forth a little bit about this as that happened. Like I would have happily lost the game to A&M if it meant that we did not have Terrance Arceneaux out for the year. Because losing to A&M would have stung my pride. I want to lose the Aggies anything, especially at kind of our premier sport.
Right.
But losing to A&M, other than maybe, you get a one lower seed or something like that come March. Other than that, it's not really hurting you and your chances to win come March. Whereas losing Terrance Arceneaux, it hurts your chances to win come March. So that's definitely a loss for him and a loss for the team as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think you said it all. If we are going to lose, if we're going to lose Arceneaux or we could beat A&M, I take the loss to A&M over losing Arceneaux, because while beating A&M at Toyota Center is great, at the end of the day, I want to win in March, and Terrance Arceneaux gives us the best chance to win in March. We were talking about the fact that like his stats don't exactly pop out of, they don't pop off the box score, right? But if you watch the games, that Terrance Arceneaux is that guy who can kind of come in and just give a little bit of a spark. He comes off the bench and he'll give you 4 quick ones. And those may be the only 4 that he gives you all game, but he makes a difference on the defensive side of the ball. And he's that little pop of energy that you sometimes need. And to not have that in March is going to be depth wins in college basketball in March. And you just took a big blow to your depth there.
Yeah. I think notably your two most similar players to Arceneaux are, probably Ramon Walker Jr. and Malik Wilson, a couple of guys who figure to get, like they've kind of been part of the regular rotation against the lesser teams that Kelvin Sampson is not worried about beating, and then have kind of played smaller roles, when Houston plays kind of the tougher teams on their schedule and non-conference play. But, you're not running a 7-man rotation. So I think all of a sudden, though, that means that in those big games, which is basically every game,
Big 12 game
after your next 2 against Penn and West Virginia, who are both pretty bad, every other kind of game the rest of the year is a big game. So I think we're going to see, Walker and Wilson getting a lot more minutes than they would have. So, next that's kind of the next man up cliche, right? Is seeing what those guys can give you the rest of the year. Did want to mention though that Houston did beat A&M, and like you said, beating Texas A&M is great, and beating Texas A&M is great. So that is great that Houston did that. This was a wild one. A&M came out hot in the first few minutes of the game. Houston dominated the rest of the first half, went into the intermission with a 15-point lead, extended that to as many as 21 in the second half. But the Aggies came back, maybe more accurately, Wade Taylor IV came back, as he had one of the most ridiculous halves of basketball we have ever seen from an opponent against a Kelvin Sampson team. When Houston pushed that lead to that game high 21 points, A&M scored the next 12 points to make it a game again. 8 of those points came from Wade Taylor IV. The Aggies ended up tying the game at 63 with 90 seconds left to play on Taylor's 5th 3-pointer of the game, giving him the 31 points on the day. Houston on the ensuing possession got a huge dunk from Javier Francis off the drive and dish from Jamal Shed. Shed also then got the defensive rebound on the next possession and then assisted on Emmanuel Sharp's 3 right after that to make it a 5-point Houston lead. Taylor would hit yet another 3 to give him 34 points and cut the lead back down to 2, but Sharp hit 2 clutch free throws in the closing seconds to ice the game and give Houston a 70-66 victory. And Bobby, this one was wild because it felt like A&M hit every single bullet point in the how to upset Houston plan. They got to the line a bunch. They were plus 14 in free throw attempts. They were plus 8 in free throws made. They took good care of the ball. They really have all year. They didn't let Houston pester them into too many turnovers. Total turnovers were even. Houston was only plus 1 in points off turnovers. They've rebounded like banshees all year, especially on the offensive glass. They grabbed 1 more offensive rebound than Houston, and they turned that into a plus 12 in second chance points. And when you kind of nullify Houston's advantages in the rebound and turnover margin, and you're plus, you're actually plus in those categories, and you're plus in free throws, all of a sudden it turns into kind of who's making more shots. And then A&M had their best player go absolutely unconscious and just make a bunch of crazy shots. And they still lost. So it really felt like Houston took every swing that A&M had to offer. They came all the way back from 21 and tied it up, and then they still lost. And it's, I think, very notable that Taylor, for as incredible a game as he had, was the only Aggie in double figures. Houston had Sharp, Cryer, Shed, and Juwan Roberts all in double figures in this one. Bobby taking a hard fought and I think ultimately a very good resume win over the Aggies at the Toyota Center.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those games that you get a little stressed out watching. When you're up 21, you're kind of going, all right, well, do I really need to watch the rest of this game? Like, this is a cakewalk. And then all of a sudden, and to be honest, you're kind of concerned with U of H's lack of scoring. When U of H doesn't score, luckily our defense does a good job of holding people, but there have, in almost every game this year, we have had droughts of just not scoring. And granted, against the bad teams, we do a great job of keeping them from scoring, so we still win by a lot. But against good teams in the Big 12, in the NCAA tournament, you have to score. You cannot have these extended droughts. And it's starting to become one of those things that you start going, now, Kelvin Sampson teams have had this. This is definitely a thing that has happened with this program throughout the years, but it's definitely a little more concerning this year because it feels like those scoring droughts are just a little bit longer, if that makes sense. And the defense, while still really good, doesn't feel as good as it did the last couple of years. And so I don't want to say that we are, hitting the panic button or anything like that, but it's definitely something that you need to see get better in Big 12 play heading into March, heading into the Big 12 tournament, heading into the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're not hitting panic, but I think as we're noting, Jamal Shad, I just saw this today. Well, I said today that we suck offensively right now.
Well, he said it, not me. He said it, not me. All right.
A little harsh. I think according to Ken Palm, it's still like a top 20 offense in the country or something like that. I mean, it could be worse, certainly. But I thought it was very notable that I was trying to find the exact tweet here, but I saw Goku, our friend at Goku's tweeting that something about how that they've been drilling obviously real hard in the practices since they got back from Christmas break, and so they've been drilling really hard offensively. And it's just not usually, you always hear Kelvin Sampson talking about the defensive practices, talking about the rebounding practices. You never really hear them be like, oh yeah, we were drilling the hell out of them offensively. But that's I think where this team is insane defensively. Like, it probably would not hurt to do spend a practice or two focusing on trying to get the offense to be a little bit more consistent. And even coming out of a game that you're happy to win over A&M. And then the Cougs got another win, comfortably beating Texas State last Thursday, 72-37. One of the most smothering defensive performances we've seen, even by this team's high standards. They forced 27 turnovers. And then in the rare instances when the Bobcats actually held onto the ball and took a shot, they made less than 29% of their shots from the field in this one. I was impressed in the first half with Texas State's defensive identity. They held Houston to just 29 first half points. But the Cougs looked much more confident after the break. They scored 43 in the second half, 6 more points than the Bobcats scored the entire game, turning this one into a well and true blowout. And, I will say that in a lot of sports, and we say this a lot, in basically every sport, what matters is how you do against the good teams, not the extent to which you're able to demolish mediocre to bad teams. But this was still an example of it being really fun to demolish a mediocre team, watching them just look like they were just going to be lucky if they even managed to get a shot off.
Yeah. And, kind of looking at the box score, you kind of look at the game and how it kind of flowed. We talked about Damian Dunn, right? And how he was going to have to step up. 22 minutes, 6 points. Terrance Arceneaux-esque, to be honest, right? Not quite as productive, but if we're going to get that out of Dunn going into the tournament and into Big 12 play, I'm actually okay with it. I think it was a good opportunity for him to kind of step up, kind of show what he could do, and kind of get used to playing Kelvin Sampson basketball. in real time. So really happy to see that from him as well.
Yeah, so looking forward, the Cougs will be hosting Penn on Saturday the 30th. The Quakers have been a consistently above average Ivy League team under head coach Steve Donahue, but they've only managed to make one NCAA tournament appearance while he's been in charge. That was back in 2018. They haven't been a top 100 Ken Pom team since 2007. Ken Pom does currently have them at 177, just 3 spots ahead of the Texas State team that Houston just played. They are 6-5 against Division I competition, including the hands down most insane 2-game sequence imaginable back in November when they stunned Villanova for an upset win 1 game and then turned around in their very next game and lost to Maryland Eastern Shore, one of the worst teams in D1. Maryland Eastern Shore 0-8 against all other D1 opponents. None of those 8 wins were even by single digits. Literally their second best game that they've played besides beating Penn, that's not even close. Comfortably their second best game after beating Penn was losing by 11 to East Carolina. Oof. And that is the game that you played immediately after beating a Villanova team that even despite losing that game, Ken Pom has as a top 25 team. Like, even by college sports standards, that is bizarre.
That is very bizarre.
Very little sense. I don't know what to make of that. They've kind of evened out since then and just looks like a not very good team. Yeah. In terms of the things that you have to account for, you start with their 3-point shooting. They take a good number of threes and they make 37.6% of them. They've got 3 guys with 22 or more threes made this year already, and they rebound really well. They're significantly above average hitting the glass on both ends of the court. That's certainly something that, a coach of a team that's about to face a Kelvin Sampson team wants as a team that rebounds well, and Penn certainly checks the box there. But in terms of the reasons why they don't really scare you, it's most of the other things. They're pretty bad defensively. Houston, kind of like we talked about, has been inconsistent offensively. This is a team they should be consistently putting up points again. They're not very good defensively. They haven't been good against much worse teams than Houston. They also, when they have the ball, they turn it over a fair amount. They don't force a lot of turnovers. It's hard to see this one being anything other than a pretty significant edge for the Cougars in that department. And then, they've been pretty awful on the road. Their win over Villanova was at home. The loss to Eastern Shore was a road game. Their only road win this year came against an extremely bad Rider team, and they needed overtime to get even that win. So, you never want to sound too confident against a team that has a stunning upset this year already, Bobby, but I think Houston's going to beat Penn.
Yeah, I think you're on to something there, buddy. You pretty much covered the Penn Quakers in as much depth as I feel we should cover the Penn Quakers. Not much is going to scare you coming into the game. Again, it's with a lot of the games that we've played this year, it's just going to be, can Houston not beat itself? Can we score? Can we not go on a 10-minute long scoring drought and then still stop teams? Can we not score for 6 minutes and still get stops to keep us in it and not let a team pull away or prevent us from pulling away? I think this is definitely one of those situations that we are more focused on. Can Houston execute the way Houston needs to versus can Penn out execute Houston?
Yeah, the only thing that I think I would say on top of that is maybe just that, it will have been 9 days since Houston's last game when they played this game, including, the break for the holidays and everything. So I think it's not inconceivable that Houston might come out a little rusty, but it's hard.
A little flat, a little rusty.
It's hard to conceive. It's hard to imagine that rust is going to be long lasting enough to make this a competitive game when Houston is just kind of, a couple of orders of magnitude more talented than Penn is.
Yeah, and it very well could be a situation like the game you and I went to. I'm blanking on which game we went to. Which game did I go to? Jackson State.
Jackson State.
It was, that game finished a 34-point game, and it wasn't ever in the second half really in doubt. But there were times where you and I looked at each other. We didn't score a ton, and we just kind of looked at each other like, what in the world is happening here? Are we going to be able to fix this? So
Yeah. And then you look up and you won by 34 and you go, oh,
Right. Exactly.
I guess we fixed it.
I guess we fixed it. So I could see maybe coming out a little flat like we did in the Jackson State game, not wanting to be in the locker room at halftime. And Kelvin Sampson not doing the halftime interview, but still winning by 34. So
all right, switching to women's hoops. The Cougs got a win at UTSA. Then they got smashed at Washington State before coming back home to beat Rice in overtime. We'll just take those chronologically. Cougs got their first win of the year against the top 200 net team with the win at UTSA last Thursday by a 66-64 final score. Game that Houston dominated for the first half. They were up 47-27 at the half. They led by as many as 22 points in this one. And then they built that big lead by forcing a bunch of turnovers and getting a bunch of easy buckets off of turnovers. You talk about being a little bit rusty. Notably, UTSA was coming off of their finals break and hadn't played in 11 days coming into this one and kind of looked like a pretty rusty team. And then after halftime, UTSA stopped looking like a rusty team. They looked like a team that knew how to beat Houston's press. They stopped turning the ball over, and the momentum shifted back the Roadrunners' way in a big way. They were able to pull within 2 points in the final minute. Cameron Jones grabbed an offensive rebound on Houston's ensuing possession, got fouled, made the first free throw, missed a second. Cougs grabbed another offensive rebound off of that free throw. Layla Blair gets fouled, makes both of her free throws, pushes the lead to 5, enough cushion that even when UTSA hit a 3 in the closing seconds, the Cougs were able to hold on and avoid what would have been a very embarrassing, kind of similar in parallel to the men. The women had the 22-point lead, the men had the 21-point lead. Both of them nearly blew it and then managed to pull it out at the last second. It's not going to be a huge, sparkling resume win that's going to impress the committee or anything like that, but definitely good to get your first, kind of best win of the year up until that point and beat a capable team on the road and not blow the 22-point lead entirely.
Yeah, if you're going to go cold from the field, make sure you have a 22-point lead to do it.
The Cougs, however, were not able to keep that momentum going for their next road game, which came at a solid borderline top 25 Washington State team. And the Cougs got demolished essentially from the word go. They would surrender 22 plus points in every quarter and lose 95-48. And, we've talked before about how Houston's full court press, try to create turnovers and have that be your entire team identity strategy seems to kind of break down against good teams. And we saw that again here. Houston did actually have a 16-11 edge in turnovers, but that's just not a major significant advantage. And they got dominated in every other facet of the game. They lost points in the paint by a huge margin. They lost fast break points by a big margin. They got out rebounded by 26. Wazzu's field goal percentage was nearly double Houston's at like 58 point something to 29 point something. And again, like the UTSA one was fine, but that's a team that's in the 140s of the net. And again, Houston goes on to beat Rice after this one, who's, barely inside the top 100. So I guess that's their best win. But my goodness, the 2 times Houston has played a borderline top 50 team and a borderline top 25 team in Middle Tennessee and now Washington State, respectively, Bobby, they've gotten doubled up. Yeah.
They've gotten doubled up. Dustin, one of my favorite things to look at is the game flow. I really like looking at it on the men's team and just kind of watching us slowly separate ourselves. Dustin, in the second quarter, so those of you who don't know, women's basketball plays 4 quarters, not 2 halves, so I'm not just a crazy guy talking here. In the second quarter, U of H scored 8 points. They started the quarter with 16. They ended the first half with 24. 8 points in 10 minutes of basketball. The line, if this was your heartbeat, you'd die. It is just flat. It looks like Lubbock, Texas. It's just flat. Nothing's going on. There's no bumps. Our team, the Cougs went, hold on, I got to do the math here. 6 minutes in the second quarter, and they scored 2 points. 2 points in 6 minutes. 1 bucket. They made 1 bucket in a 6-minute stretch. Now, if you are our men's team and you don't score for 6 minutes, you have the defense to back that up. The other team doesn't score during that time. The problem is we didn't stop them. It was 32-22. And at the end of the half, it was 47-24. You just got outclassed in the second quarter. Just absolutely outclassed. Beat by 14 in the second quarter. Beat by 12 in the third quarter. Beat by 12 in the fourth quarter. You didn't win a quarter of this game. In fact, you lost by 9 in the first quarter. You almost lost by double digits in every quarter of this game. You got doubled up by a barely top 25 team. And we're supposed to believe that this team's going to make the tournament and that this is where we're supposed to be and that this program is heading in the right direction. They've looked great against very bad, very, very, very bad teams. But like you said, in the two decent tests, it's just not holding up. Something has to change.
It was one thing when we were in the American playing UConn and losing a game by this kind of a margin. You go, okay, they're
UConn.
They're UConn. They're like there's a handful of teams at the top of women's basketball that are quite often just kind of on a different planet talent-wise than the rest of the sport. And you can be a good, NCAA tournament team and still get your butt just walloped by a team like UConn or something like that. This is a good Washington State team. It's a good team. They're a borderline top 25 team. I would love to have their women's basketball program. They're not UConn. There's no reason to be losing by 47 to this team. The reason you're losing by 47 to this team is because when your full court press doesn't work, you have no offensive identity that does not involve getting layups out of turnovers. And you have no half court defense when good teams,
when they break the press,
can beat your press. That's why Houston just got embarrassed on both ends of the court.
Absolutely.
In this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Cougs did close out non-conference play with an overtime win over Rice, 71-63, avenging last year's double overtime loss to the Owls. Cougs took an 8-point lead into the half. Rice would fight back and briefly take a 1-point lead at one point in the fourth quarter. It goes to overtime after Layla Blair is fouled out on a charge in the closing moments of regulation. However, in overtime, Houston forced Rice to miss all 8 of their shots and outscored the Owls 8-0 in overtime to get the 71-63 lead. And she did foul out and did not play in overtime, but still, Layla Blair showed up in a big way for the Cougars in this one before fouling out. Finished with 26 points on 9 of 19 shooting. So, happy to get the win over the Owls. And again, it's a team that is barely in the top 100, so it becomes comfortably your best win of the year. It'd be a little bit easier to be more excited about this win, like I said, if it didn't come on the heels of the game that it did come on the heels of.
Yeah, if you play Washington State close, like that's the thing, is if you get this win and you play Washington State to 5, I think we feel much better, right? If you played Middle Tennessee State to 5 and you got blown out by Washington State, I think or Middle Tennessee State, however you want to do it, I think if you play one of those games close and then you beat this Rice team, you go, okay, there's something here. We're not going to be the bottom, but man, I don't know anymore.
Yeah, so we're going to find out how good this team is in Big 12 play, because that is their next game. Is on Saturday. They are hosting Texas Tech to open Big 12 play. They'll be at Kansas State Wednesday of next week. The Red Raiders coming to town for Houston's first ever Big 12 game. They are 11-2 on the year, and if you see that 11-2 and you're remembering Cheryl Swoops and the national title in '93 and thinking Tech must have a strong women's basketball program, that is not entirely accurate. They actually haven't been to the NCAA tournament.
No, we're not going to pass over that Independence Day reference there.
I'm glad.
Nope,
you know what?
Nope. We're not just going to pass that over like you didn't just make it.
Mr. President, that's not entirely accurate.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I threw it in there, and I intentionally chose not to draw attention to it, but I'm delighted that you immediately knew where that was from. No, but Texas Tech has not been to the NCAA tournament since 2013. And that 11-2 record this year is inflated by playing a bunch of cupcakes. They're only number 55 in the current net rankings. And not only that, they're 11-2. They were 11-0, and they've lost their last 2 in a row. They went to an event out in Hawaii and lost both of their games there. One of those losses coming to a pretty solid Oregon State team, and there's no real shame in that. But the other one came against a very mediocre Tulsa team, and there's a little shame in that one. So, if you look at common opponents, they played A&M Commerce and UTSA to got pretty similar results to the results Houston got against those teams. And notably, Tech played both of those teams in Lubbock while Houston faced both of those teams on the road. So this one feels not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Houston's gonna have a lot of very unwinnable games in the Big 12. We'll talk about one of them here in a second. But like this feels like a Texas Tech team that Houston should at least be able to compete with. And I say, should, the word should is doing a lot of heavy lifting
work there
in that sentence there. But I will say that they're in a very similar spot in the net rankings to Middle Tennessee, kind of around the 50-ish range. And this is the team that, like I said, Middle Tennessee embarrassed this team in the Fertitta Center. This feels like a shot at redemption against playing at home against a team of that similar quality that you kind of should be able to at least play a halfway competitive game against. And this is another test for Houston to see. Kind of like I said, if you were going to even be remotely competitive in the Big 12, this needs to be a game that you're playing Texas Tech at least close at home, if not outright getting the win.
Absolutely. If you have any dreams at this point of being an NCAA tournament team, you can't lose to Texas Tech at this point. Let's just all be honest. We're not going to win the conference title, but if you want one of those at-large bids, you got to make up for those two big losses. When bracketology pops up in Selection Monday, don't they do it on Mondays? Once Selection Monday pops up and they have everything listed, those key losses are going to pop up on are going to pop up on the screen, and you need to balance those key wins out if you have any hope of making the tournament this year.
I was gonna say, notably, Houston is in the top 100 in the net, barely. They're like, I think, 91 or something right now. So they're not just like miles and miles away. And I mean, for as much as embarrassing as the Washington State and Middle Tennessee losses are, like, at least you haven't lost any bad teams, right? So
you don't have any bad losses on your resume.
At the end of the day, you're hoping the committee is just looking at the teams that have beaten you and not looking at how much they beat you by. So if that happens, maybe you can kind of play your way into contention here. But like you said, with the home game against this Tech team, you probably have to have this one. Tech has a pair of guards in Bailey Mopin and Jasmine Shavers, who are averaging each of them over 15 points per game apiece. So we'll see if the Cougar guards can kind of slow them down. And then the Cougs will have the road trip to Kansas State, the Little Apple, on Wednesday. The Wildcats are 12-1. That is not a hollow 12-1.
No, it is not.
Both a win over Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes in Iowa City, and also a loss to Iowa at a neutral site. They also have a win over a top 25 North Carolina team. They're currently number 8 in the net, 11 in the AP poll, 16 in the coaches poll. 6'6" senior center Ayoka Lee is a monster, averaging over 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. Bobby, this one looks like it's going to get ugly.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't get too ugly. Hopefully you can do a little bit against their press, or you can press them a little bit, but I don't see how we keep this one close when we're not keeping it close against top 60 teams. So,
all right. And then real quick, just want to mention on the way out before we get out of here, the Cougar baseball program announced its full schedule in recent days. I believe we'd already seen the Big 12 matchups, but we get the full schedule. The non-conference highlights are the tournament at Minute Maid Park, where Houston is finally going back to after a few years away from not playing in that event. They'll get 3 games, 1 against powerhouse Vanderbilt, and then 2 against very solid mid-majors in Texas State and Louisiana Lafayette. As I continue multiple times in this episode to annoy anyone that has any affinity for that school by calling them Louisiana Lafayette, we will never capitulate to the Louisiana demands there.
They're lucky I don't call them ooh la la. All right, you're lucky I don't call you that.
I'm more than happy to drop an ooh la la in here. We'll do it. The only other highlight on this non-conference schedule is having a Tuesday roadie up to College Station to take on the Aggies. Aside from that, with lots of challenging Big 12 weekends on tap, Houston, maybe understandably, coming off of a rough year, chose to not really challenge themselves too much with the rest of their non-conference schedule. Their other 3 weekend opponents are Binghamton, St. John's, and UT Arlington. All finished outside of the top 100 last year. Arlington, the only team that was even really close to the top 100. And then your midweekers, you get the 3 against Rice and Sam Houston as per usual. But neither of those programs have been very good in recent years, and everything else other than the A&M game is just a whole bunch of triple digit type of teams that you're looking at there. So like I said, maybe understandable given that you're playing in the Big 12 and that you've been having kind of a rough time the last couple of years. But man, not a whole lot to really get excited about with the non-conference schedule reveal.
Yeah, I mean, you can if you've never made the drive to Bryan, College Station, do it. It's a great place to watch baseball. As much as I hate giving Aggies credit for anything, it's a great place to watch baseball. One of the best bits I've ever seen at a baseball stadium was when the light rail would drive past and they would try to guess how many cars were on the train. Or no, we did that. I'm sorry. They guess how many cars are on the train, and then if they get it right, they all go crazy. And then we decided to do it at the softball stadium with the light rail, and we would always say 2 because it was always 2 cars. just a fun little thing that we decided to do because we're degenerates. But a great place to watch a stadium. I hate giving them credit, but Bluebell Park, if it is still called that, is a great place to watch baseball. So if you can make it out there, I highly recommend that. And the more red in that stadium, the better for our fans. So for our players. So highly recommend that. And it's kind of been interesting looking at the schedules this year for just every team, right? You have the rare philosophy where it was schedule ridiculously hard, and you have the Big 12 schedule, and like we saw it this year with David Rare, right? With the volleyball team, we started ranked, and even though we lost, we stayed ranked because we played hard teams all year. They stayed ranked and they showed that they could compete at a top 25 level. So really interesting with that. But then you have the philosophy of soccer and women's basketball, right? Where it's do a bunch of cupcakes, try to get some really good wins, and build some confidence in your team heading into Big 12 play. And it seems like our teams that have been struggling the last couple of years have taken that route. And if we're being honest, not that I can say anything about women's basketball yet, but it doesn't look like it's paying off to go super, super easy.
Yeah, I was gonna say the 2 teams that we've seen lean heavy into we're just not going to schedule too hard because we're in the Big 12 now is Cougar soccer and Cougar women's basketball. And that hasn't looked like a winning strategy as of yet. Again, and maybe that has more to do with just where those programs were at personnel.
Yeah.
Than what they chose to do in non-conference. But I mean, this is a baseball team that's been kind of, needs to start building back from where they were personnel wise as well. So we'll see how that goes starting in less than 2 months from now. When they get going in February. I think that is it. We're going to go ahead and cut it off there on our way out. As always, wanted to give a huge hello, thank you. We appreciate you so much to our Scott and Holman podcast Patreon supporters. The cost of joining our Patreon is $5 a month. $5 or up, you can get access to the bonus content that we put out there. That includes, if you're looking forward to Cougar football this coming year, I've been constantly updating a Google Doc that you can get the link to from our Patreon. It's got at every position, you've got a breakdown of who do we have, how much eligibility do they have left, what are their career stats, what did they grade out with PFF last year, what was their recruiting ranking. Just really all the information you can need at every position to kind of wrap your head around where this roster is at heading into next year. So would really encourage you to go take advantage of that. And also, like I mentioned, you get good karma from putting as little as $5 a month towards Sam, Bobby, and myself for the work that we're putting in every week to bring this podcast to you. Also, if you're not at the point in your life where you can afford the $5 a month, we would love for you to support the Scott Holman podcast by going and on your podcast listening app of choice, giving us a 5-star review, as that always does help us out, helps get the word out there to other Cougs to help us find this podcast. If you want to say hi to us or reach out, you can do that by emailing us, shpodcast@gmail.com, or by tweeting at us at shpodcast, or by saying hi on Blue Sky. You have basically a 100% chance if you're on Blue Sky. If you want to get a response, I am delighted anytime anyone messages or posts at us on Blue Sky. So if you want to say hi and have a just 100% chance that at least one of us will see it and respond, at podcast.bsky.social. Say hi over there. So that's it for us. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, you are an absolute rock star. And as always,
go Cougs.
Go. If I hit end, is it gonna stop recording or it's not gonna like leave, right? Let's see. Let's hit. Can I just hit stop recording? Stop.